All right. Well, welcome everyone for coming out for our 2022 Spring Chubb Fellowship with Hilary Hahn. So I can't say enough how much of an honor this is to be up here introducing Hilary Hahn to all of you. It's just been quite the journey in terms of getting her here, and now the day has come. So it is really, really thrilling to have three-time Grammy Award-winning violin virtuoso Hilary Hahn with us. So before we begin today's conversation, I ask that you make sure you turn off all your cell phones and refrain from taking any photographs, except for our official photographer, so that you don't disrupt today's program. And please don't record either, okay? So, devices off. And I want to begin today's program with a land acknowledgement. Today's Chubb Fellowship event sits on traditional indigenous territories. This includes lands of the Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Chatikatekok, Golden Hill, Pagusset, Niantic, Quinnipiac, and other Algonquin-speaking peoples. We honor and pay respect to their peoples of past and present. So my name is Mary Liu. I'm a professor in the Department of History in the program of American Studies, and also affiliated with Ethnicity, Race, and Migration. I'm also the head of Timothy Dwight College, the home of the Chubb Fellowship. So as the head of Timothy Dwight, or TD, I have the honor of serving as the custodian of our illustrious Chubb Fellowship, established in 1941 out of a prior large donation for education purposes. This was made in 1936 by Hendon Chubb, a graduate of the Yale class of 1895. Since its establishment, the Chubb Fund has adhered to the goals of providing encouragement and aid to students interested in government and American public affairs. The fellowship initially aimed to foster among our Yale undergraduates an interest in public service in local and state affairs, grew over the years to include numerous distinguished visitors in national and international fairs, as well as leaders in the world of the arts and humanities. Since the 1940s, the Chubb Fellowship Lecture Series has inspired generations of Yale students to undertake public service and pursue leadership roles in the hopes of creating a better world today and for posterity. The fellowship has hosted 4 U.S. presidents: George H.W. Bush, Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, and Harry Truman. And in recent years, we've welcomed a wide range of national and international leaders, including our congressional representative, the Honorable Rosa DeLauro, Olympic ice skater Michelle Kwan, visual artist Faith Ringgold, environmental activist Bill McKibben, physician and humanitarian Dr. Hawa Abdi, and world-renowned actor Shah Rukh Khan, just to name a few. So with this quick description of the history and aims of the Chubb Fellowship, I'm deeply honored today to have Hilary Hahn join the impressive list of Chubb Fellows who have visited Timothy Dwight College and Yale. And today's event has particularly deep significance as it marks the relaunch of our Chubb Fellowship program after a 2-year disruption because of the COVID-19 pandemic. TD had selected Ms. Hahn to be our fall 2020 Chubb Fellow just before the university shut down in the spring of 2020. And we have waited patiently for 2 years, and I heard that she's waited patiently for 2 years to come to campus and join us in restarting our wonderful Chubb Fellowship. We've always considered the Chubb as our gift to the university and to the city of New Haven. So for today's Chubb event, I am particularly grateful for the hard work of my wonderful Timothy Dwight College staff, our student aids team, the support of Yale College Arts, the School of Music, and the Yale Symphony Orchestra for supporting our Spring Chubb Fellowship program. Putting together a large-scale public event is never simple, and doing so under COVID-19 conditions is even more challenging. So thank you to everyone who helped make this happen today. I'm just simply thrilled that we're once again able to share the Chubb Fellowship with the university and the city. So With that, let me get to our main event. So as a preschooler, Hilary Hahn started her musical studies with the Suzuki Method violin lessons at the Peabody Conservatory in Baltimore. At the age of 10, she was admitted to the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia. So all you people who are just starting violin, you gotta get a move on it. At 17, she recorded her debut album, Hilary Hahn Plays Bach, to wide acclaim, and in 2001, she was named America's Best Young Classical Musician by Time magazine. She has recorded with Decca, Deutsche Grammophon, and Sony, and her 19 feature albums have all opened on the top 10 of the Billboard charts. She has won Grammys for 3 of her albums, the 2003 Brahms and Stravinsky Concerto album, a 2008 pairing of the Schoenberg and Sibelius Concerti, and her 2013 recording of In 27 Pieces, the Hilary Hahn Encores. Hilary Hahn is a great supporter of new music. In 2009, she premiered composer Jennifer Higdon's violin concerto that had been written for her when the two first met in Higdon's class in 20th century music at Curtis. She premiered the Higdon Concerto with the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra, and the piece was awarded the Pulitzer Prize the following year. In addition to Higdon, she has collaborated with a number of contemporary composers, commissioning new works such as 6 partitas by Anton Garcia Abril and Sonata No. 4, Fractured Dreams by Lara Auerbach. Timothy Dwight College selected Ms. Hahn to be our Fall 2020 Chubb Fellow in recognition of her leadership in making music accessible through her performances and recordings. She has launched several exciting projects, such as her hashtag 100 Days of Practice, which we'll hear more about, using the Instagram platform to inspire musicians of all levels to play and share in their experience of music making. She's also launched the Bring Your Own Baby concerts to encourage parents of infants and toddlers to share their love of classical music in a relaxed and welcoming environment. And in 2014, Hahn was awarded the Glass Chute Original Music Festival Award for her, quote, ability to inspire young people through the intensive and uncompromising approach to making music. In 2019, she donated her $25,000 prize to the Philadelphia nonprofit Project 440 in recognition of their outstanding work with the city's youth to ignite their interest in music and harness music's potential for individual growth and community empowerment. For those reasons, she is our Spring 2020 Chubb Fellow. So her energetic and innovative leadership in expanding the world of classical music is extremely welcome, especially in this present moment of 2022. So please join me in welcoming Hilary Hahn.
And taking some questions from the audience. First, I thought I would play a movement of solo Bach to get us all grounded together, and then I'll proceed. New strings.
that was, as you heard, we are so appreciative of you, and sure, I'll take some water, if you're pouring.
Yeah, sure.
No, that was a beautiful performance of Bach's Sarabande, and
Thank you.
Just really appreciative of you sharing your music with us today. So maybe one more round of applause. So maybe just to start, let's pick up on Bach. I know it has clearly some very special meaning to you. It was your first album that Hilary Hahn plays Bach. That's quite a statement. But I'm just curious if you can tell us more about your relationship to the music of Bach.
Yeah, I started my recording career with solo Bach because I was 16 and it was the music that I'd played the most. And it just felt like if I'm going to record something, I should record something that I've played a lot. And I'm really glad I did, because starting with a solo album, I got to learn all about the recording process without the pressure of time. We recorded all night, like multiple nights in a row. Each piece had its own separate time of the year. Like, we really had the luxury to take our time, and I got to learn about recording. I got to learn about playbacks and about like acoustics and how it sounds different under the mics from how it sounds when you're playing for the audience. So I really was working with such an expert team, and if I hadn't started with that, I think I wouldn't have been so inclined to be involved. And these days I co-produce my records. I am involved in every aspect. Sometimes I run the sessions if it's a very small crew. Sometimes I let the producer run the session, but I have so much experience now, and I'm really glad that I started with that. But I will say, when I first proposed that as the repertoire for that first album, it felt very natural to me, but back then it was, back in the 90s, it's still 20th century, back then it was kind of taboo for a teenager to be playing Bach or be, I suppose, like projecting authority on the music of Bach or Brahms or Beethoven. It was sort of seen as like further along in your career material and pretty audacious. And I think there was a little pushback inside the record company, but I didn't know that. So I just went ahead and did it. But now, I think because I was so convinced of my playing of it, it was so comfortable for me. And I enjoy the intricacies of it. It just comes very naturally to me, although it never feels totally natural to play it. But the ideas feel like they make sense when I'm playing his music. I think because of that, when I was the teenager recording and releasing Bach, it made it okay later. So I definitely see people starting their recording careers with solo Bach now, and I'm like, you're welcome. But it was an honor to be able to start with that.
So when we were walking in, we were playing your newer album, the Virtuoso Album.
Yeah.
So lots have changed in between.
Yeah, that album is, it's called a compilation, and usually the record companies put it together.
Oh, I see.
But I actually put it together. It's my favorite tracks from a lot of my different albums, and my favorites for different reasons. Like I might have an emotional attachment to one project. I might remember working on this one with the composer, or like this, whenever I play it as an encore, it's a big hit, and therefore I really feel like the audience connects with it. And so when I listen to it, I remember all those great performance experiences. And so, yeah, that's what I was doing with that record.
So how different is that newer record from the retrospective record, which you did in 2018? Now, was that something the record company put together, or you curated that too?
I curated that as well, but I added some tracks that I had performed live. And so, yeah, it's kind of nice. It's nice to go back and look at the work that you've done and not have someone else pick out their favorite things, but really put together. It's like playlists on a really big scale. And it's kind of surprising to me, because every time I do a project, I'm just doing that project. And like when I count how many records I've done, I'm like, how did that all happen? But it's just really chipping away at things, one little part of a project at a time, and having ideas that I follow through on.
So I noticed that between the 2018 retrospective and the 2020 Virtuoso, there's some repeats. So clearly these are some of your favorites, right? Can we talk about some of them?
Sure.
Like, how did they become some of your favorites? Like the Paganini Concerto, I think, is one, and the Higden Concerto must be another one. Yeah.
How do I detangle the threads? Actually, I don't know if, like, I think of sort of like the overarching experience. Like, I think when I'm thinking about my favorite tracks from records, it's more like I listen to them, but it's the context in which they occur. So there are pieces that I learned with my teacher and pieces that I taught myself, you know, and there's all sorts of different transitions. There are pieces that I commissioned, there are projects that I started, and I think with Paganini, you know, it's such virtuoso music, but I find the beauty in the phrasing. I kind of like looking at something that is thought of one way and showing that it's actually much more complicated than that. There are many other aspects that exist. And the same with a commissioned work. I don't like to look at it as just, let's play the notes and get it out there. It's really, how can we already work to find, as performers, whoever the combination of performers is for this particular performance, how can we find our interpretation to really bring this music across to the audience as a complete piece. If I think about what Brahms would have sounded like to a new audience, if the performers had no idea of phrasing traditions, and then I make that leap in my head to what we assume now of Brahms with all the traditions, we know the structure, we've heard a lot of those works a lot. That's my job in a new piece. My job is to like do that leap and get it to the place where there are clear phrases, where the music can really speak to the audience, not just play it through and say it's a premiere, but really make it a whole experience for the audience. Because when it starts that way, it can then evolve as other players pick it up. I believe like the energy you put into any piece that you play, but especially the first performance of a piece, kind of sets it on its journey. And if you give it a big, good shove away from the dock, you know, you're like, yes, and it's all set to, if it's a ship, it's like all set to sail, then that is really, I think, the best thing you could do for a new piece of music.
Can you describe that in terms of, or go in a little more detail about that in relation to the Jennifer Higden piece?
So I met Jennifer, as you mentioned, in the, let's see, how old was I? I was 15, so it was the mid-90s, and she had just graduated from Curtis, and she hadn't yet become like inundated with commissions, but it was coming. She was getting busier and busier. And I was her student. She was a really enlightening teacher. She taught 20th century music history and brought it from, you know, like the very beginning of the 20th century all the way into the present day. Each week we learned about one or two new composers that we hadn't studied before. And the way she would teach, she would put just like some keywords on the board, and then we'd listen. And it wasn't teaching the facts about a composer, it was teaching the ideas, it was teaching us what to listen to, how to pick things apart, but not in an analytical way, but more of like an emotional connection to what we were hearing and defining that for ourselves. And there were some facts on the board too, but we were never quizzed on those. We were quizzed on how we related to the music. And I think that was a great way to get to know her as a composer, because she's very specific in her music. Like, she really wants the score to be like she writes, but she doesn't write anything extra that she doesn't need to have in there. And the music has a lot of energy, and it communicates immediately. It's almost clearer for the audience than it is for the player. So my challenge with that concerto has always been to embody it as much as the audience hears me embodying it. It's very clear music to listen to, but in the middle of it, there's all this stuff going on, so you kind of have to keep your center and keep aware of all the cues, but also the momentum is super important in her music.
So how much did you work with her directly to kind of bring that music to life?
I like to leave composers be. I like to not have them second guessing when they're writing and just write what they want to write and then give me what they feel they've completed. Not like the final draft, I do like to see it before they finalize it, but basically, yeah, I just try to get the music and then we talk about things that may or may not be so practical or may or may not communicate the way that they might be trying to communicate it.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, I mean, several people have now played it, so at this point. So what do you hear when you hear others playing that concerto?
I haven't heard anyone
Oh, you
else
haven't?
play it.
Oh.
They play it, but I haven't been there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I would love to hear it. But I think that the piece it has a very strong personality, so I think it's going to sound like the same piece no matter who's playing it.
I see.
And having recorded it, I always try to record the pieces that are written for me so that there's a document, so that like push from the doc is like a global, so that anyone who wants to hear it, anyone who wants to learn it, there's a precedent, and they can just build on that. I find it a lot easier as a player myself to have something to listen to before I play a piece. So even if a piece is newly written for me, I will make my own practice recording and listen to it, get it in my head. And that's how I develop my interpretation. I listen to what I did and I think, what would I want to do differently from that player? And then I kind of develop it from there.
I can't help but wonder if that's a little bit of this early Suzuki training.
Maybe.
Listening to the piece before you play it. Or,
yeah, maybe. It could be.
Who knows? But speaking of new music, you've definitely been a big supporter of new music and contemporary composers. So the album 27 Pieces, for example, is a great example of that. So I just want to hear your philosophy towards contemporary music. What are you looking for when you're asking people to, commission a work for you?
For that album, I think I didn't realize what I was taking on. I got really excited and I commissioned a lot of people with a lot of different styles. And I was thinking in terms of minutes. I was like, okay, I've done concerti. I hadn't commissioned anything shorter than a concerto before. So I was thinking if they're all like 3 to 5 minute pieces and I commission 10, so then 10 will feel like a concerto, and then it'll just be like preparing 2 or 3 concerti, and I can do that over time. And I didn't realize each piece is about as much of a learning curve as an entire concerto. So it was learning. I'd only worked with 2 of the composers before. So it was learning the style and the intentions and the musical language of 27 composers, or 26, and I did an open contest for the final encore, which was always something I wanted. I wanted to like open it up, have accessibility for people whose music had not yet been recorded that I may not have come across. And I picked a winner out of nearly 400 entries that came in. So when we received almost 400 entries, I called a friend and I was like, can you just help like sort through them, because they were supposed to be blind entries, and I didn't want anyone to get disqualified because they'd forgotten to take the title out or forgotten to remove their name. So I had some people help me out, just sort of sorting through the contest. So I had volunteers. It was nice. It was a big project. But doing that, it was important to me to find composers whose music I felt compelled to play. Like, I was curious. When I heard their music, I was curious what they would write for violin and piano duo, and I just couldn't let it go. So that's my sign whenever I'm working on an idea. If I cannot let the idea go, if I can't stop talking about it, even once I've convinced people, they're like, yeah, we get it, we're on board. I'm like, that's my sign that it's something I have to do. Like, I'm just not gonna be able to sleep on it and it'll fade away. And so that was how I approached which composers I commissioned.
And then
that.
people say yes right away, because I imagine if Hilary Hahn is writing you, yes is the answer. But
Well, one of them, I did a lot of cold calls because I didn't know them. So I would get their number from their agent or just, I don't know, like a mutual friend or someone, and I would give them a call, maybe their website. And one of them thought it was a student prank calling, so didn't call back. So I called again, and he was like, "Oh, sorry."
it really is you.
But it was a lot of cold calls, a lot of, "Hi, I'm Hilary Hahn, I'm doing a project. Do you think you'd be interested?" And also, I wasn't sure about the politics, like asking these great contemporary composers to write short pieces for starters is like, there's a bit of an issue sometimes with composers being asked to write the first piece of a program, sort of like the overture, or being asked to write short pieces. But it was really a statement about the span of contemporary styles and expression through all of this range of styles. That's what I was going for. And so I was hoping that the composers would understand like the scope of the project. But then I wasn't sure if they would like being on a project with so many other composers. Turns out they were all really open-minded and supportive of each other, and it was really nice. Sometimes I got to introduce two composers to each other and just sit there like at a post-concert dinner. They would both have come to the concert because they both coincidentally be in the same city. And very different people, totally different styles of music, getting to know each other just made me so happy to like introduce these creative people and get to kind of observe the experience.
So you didn't really have people coming together during the writing process?
And some of them I never have met.
Oh.
I communicated with them by phone or in German. One of them doesn't do email, doesn't speak English, doesn't have a phone. And so his daughter speaks German and lives in another country and can communicate with him. And so he sent the music, and then I just kind of had a couple questions about the score, so I got the answers. It's like a game of telephone, and I was like, okay, I think the piece is just going to play itself then. Right. And that's the thing, when you're a performer and you're working with new music, you are given the responsibility of interpreting it, bringing it to life, but there's also within that responsibility a sense of like judgment. You have to use your judgment to figure out how closely you adhere to the score, how much you take on board what the composer says. And ultimately, it has to feel like the music is in you and it's natural to you. So I always try to get the composer's feedback. Maybe I send them a practice recording. If we're in the same place, I'll do a coaching session with them in person. And then I'll try one more time. If I can, I'll send them one more practice recording to see if I interpreted what they told me and have incorporated it in a way that they're comfortable with. But it's definitely it's a process, and you have to give over some of your creative license for a little while. And then ultimately, you have to understand the personality of the composer. Like one composer will write rubato and mean it starts slowly and goes faster, and another will mean the opposite. And there's nothing to say what they mean. To them, it's obvious. So you have to look at it, examine every detail, and say, now when you say rubato, what does that mean to you? And sometimes it's an emotional thing. Sometimes it's very specific. Sometimes it's just, oh, you just play it however you want to play it. It's really interesting. And I also did a published edition for the 27 Encores. One of the things I love about working with composers is looking at the score and just seeing how do they express their music in writing. And it was such a project because they were using all different software programs. They were using, some sent in handwritten scores, some had no bar lines, so where do you put a rehearsal number? But it was conceptual, like it was always intentional. And it always said something about their creative process. So in the edition, at first, the first draft of the edition, the publisher did house standards for all of the markings, like this is where we put the slur, this is where we put dynamics, not necessarily replicating what was in the version the composer turned in. And I looked at it and I said, this doesn't even look like the same piece. We have to go back to the drawing board and we have to reset all of these because they have to look different when you flip through. If a composer was minimal, it has to look minimal. If it was a composer writing like 5 instructions for every note, which I kid you not is in one of the pieces, like every one has to be lined up very precisely. We can't have any like floating markings anywhere. Like if you're going to do a column of 5, it has to be a column of 5, not 2 on top, 3 on the bottom, like fit it wherever, because when you're playing, you have to look at it a certain way, and it's an experience of reading and translating that to playing. And so that's like, anyone who works with me knows I put a lot of attention into the details because it's important. Like it's really important when working with composers because you're starting a document. The performance is a document. How many times do we have discussions in rehearsal about what about the composer? Did they mean mezzo forte here or piano there? If you're premiering something and you do an edition, you're responsible in a way for making sure if you know something about the piece and you see that it's not showing up in the score, you have to put it in there, for the sake of the composer, because no one can get everything right. So, yeah.
Speaking of documentation, I'm just curious how much social media, like YouTube, has really changed that. So, do you feel like people know you and your music through recordings or more through YouTube these days? I'm just curious.
That's a good question. I think that people's consumption patterns have changed. I used to be mad at YouTube. I'm not mad at YouTube anymore.
Why were you mad at YouTube?
Because almost everything on there was pirated, and people were very proud of spending a lot of time watching and listening to me on YouTube, and they thought they were supporting me, but they actually weren't, like in a business sense, supporting me. And I would be trying to sell records post-concert, and people would be like, I watch all of your YouTube videos. And I'm like, thank you. But don't get me wrong, I really appreciate the enthusiasm, and I eventually realized that that's not really what YouTube is about. YouTube isn't about business. YouTube, for me, like the industry I'm in, the performances are the business, and the recordings, yes, it is an industry, it is a business, but as far as the purpose for me is having the music out there as much as possible. So when I record something, I'm recording it for a purpose. I'm not recording it because I want to record my version. I'm recording it because I think there's value in something I'm doing in it existing out there for the sake of the piece. And that's why I record all the new stuff. So then, if it's on YouTube, if my performances are on YouTube, if it makes a difference in someone's life to watch the YouTube video, it's great, because I can't be everywhere at the same time. And I do notice that students have grown up watching my videos, so it's a different feeling for me now. I remember watching videos that were pirated when I was a student, and but they were videos of like Heifetz, Elman, Milstein, Kreisler, anything I could find that was an older video. And they were really formative. So I just I look at it differently now, and I appreciate the connective aspect of social media, including YouTube. It's also evolved. Like YouTube is different. It's a different experience. It has a different presence in people's lives than when it started.
Yeah, along the lines of recording and promoting different composers, I know you've done a lot in terms of wanting to promote female composers, composers of color. So I want to just hear more your philosophy about that in terms of trying to open up the world of classical music.
I think it was actually the 27 Encores project that I'm thinking about, like when my philosophy on streaming changed, because I noticed that when I was really trying to find composers for the project, I really appreciated the streaming services that would suggest the next thing. And that wasn't necessarily the case back when I was putting the project together. It was about over 10 years ago. And so what we take for granted in our listening experience now is something that has developed in my career, in the course of my career. And I was able to access composers' music that wouldn't have been on the shelf in the record store through Google searches and through searching through various video channels and also YouTube and all of that. So I definitely, at that point, that's when I let go of my misunderstanding about the purpose of streaming. And I'm one of the artists who actually is like, you know what, music is very multifaceted. It's about reaching the audience, and it's about people respecting the music. So if that's what's happening through the experience, people are getting the emotional connection they need and hearing the voices they need to hear, then that's what it's about. And in that same way, I've obviously been noticing gaps in my repertoire. I grew up in a time when at conservatory we really didn't learn new music at all. And my teacher was born in 1907, so his contemporaries were Barber, Bernstein, the Prokofiev. And so I got the feeling of knowing, as a performer, knowing a composer, but it was just not like quite up to date at that time. And now it's a different experience for students. But I would say that I definitely prioritized, I really tried with the 27 Encores to balance that project. I looked for composers from different parts of the globe, but I realized in re-examining everything over the past few years that I thought that I had good representation in it, and I didn't. I had definitely fallen into bias gaps, and I definitely had not taken some things on board that I should have taken on board. And so now, after all of the racial reckoning, after George Floyd's murder, I wound up just taking a step back because I wasn't performing at the time anyway. So I took a step back and I re-examined every layer of my work. And I was like, where am I losing the thread? Which voices are not present? How did that happen? What's going on there? How did I arrive at this point? And how could I go back and be more inclusive, have better representation? And I'm obviously still learning. It's a lifelong thing. But I re-examined all of the projects I had going. I reshifted them. And so I think from now, people will start to see that I am putting emphasis on representing as many voices as possible, because I think contemporary music and contemporary musical projects are a place where we can allow people to express their lived experiences. We look back in history, but we put things together about Mozart's life with current events at that time. But everything being written now and things being written by people whose voices haven't been heard, those are part of a historical document about the human experience. So we need to have people's experiences put into music and played. Not every experience can be expressed in words. There are a lot of feelings put into music that can never be in a historical document, that a lot of people will watch historical films to get the feel for what it might have been like to live in that time, or what did people speak like back then, or we have performance practice and we listen. So we need to keep that musical record going for the future, for 100 years from now, 150 years, 200 years, so that people playing that music can be like, that's what it felt like to be this person at this time. And no one is a monolith, so we need to take people as their full human selves and allow them to say what they need to say and get out of the way. Sharing the spotlight is not about being in the spotlight with someone else all the time. Sometimes it's giving someone the spotlight and getting out of it. And so that's something that I've been trying to do more of these days.
So when are we going to see a new project from you then? Yeah.
Well, I've already started premiering some solo encores by composers of color. The reason I've been commissioning solo encores is because I have complete programming freedom with them. The short pieces I can play in every single concert. So I can play them with an orchestra, but without the orchestra. When I would normally play solo Bach, I can play a piece by a contemporary composer. If I'm on the radio or I have a TV appearance, if a piece is 3 to 4 minutes long, too long for TV, but I can program it in a lot of short form performances. It's just me and the violin, so I can do whatever. So that's why I'm focusing on that solo encore form, which is something that I missed with the duo encores. People would want to hear them, but there's no piano on stage after I play with orchestra. I do a solo Bach recital, there's no piano there, so what do I play as an encore? More solo Bach. But it's a really interesting thing to look at the programming. I don't control most of the programs that I'm on. I'm a guest. So what can I do? And I think that's also a theme of my career. What do I really have in front of me, and what can I do with it, and how can I do more than what I initially think I can do? So for example, with the Project 440 donation, I tied that to a larger fundraising campaign. So out of 25,000, we raised 50,000. So, looking at it like being creative and making the most out of what you have. And then with that, they were able to hire a new full-time person. So it's kind of like, also with repertoire, I look at it that way. When I have an opportunity, what can I do with that opportunity, and how can I be helpful with that opportunity?
That's great. So you're so busy.
So I did premiere, there are 2 pieces. So there's one piece by Michael Apels that I premiered during the pandemic, and there's a piece that I just premiered the other day by Barbara Asiginok, and she's an Anishinaabe composer who lives up north in Turtle Island, which is North America. And she wrote a lot of the indications in the music in Ojibwe, but she also trained in the Hochschule in Munich. So she's got a very avant-garde European composition tradition, as well as growing up in the bush and being a nature guide, playing native flute, and getting a lot of her ideas during ceremonies. So it's really interesting. I think we need to listen to the voices that are creating and really put things together in ways and programs that help us see a bigger picture.
So as you're doing this, I know that you also re-recorded, or maybe I say re-recorded as though you did it before, but you recorded books 1 through 3 of Suzuki. Is this correct?
They've had several iterations of recordings.
Okay.
And so I didn't re-record my recording, but I recorded a new version at their invitation.
Right. So what inspired you to pick that project up?
They asked me, and it was nice. I mean, I was the first woman to do an official recording for the Suzuki violin repertoire. A lot of the Suzuki teachers are women, so I felt good about that. But mostly just the emotional connection to Suzuki, because I started with it. And I remember all those pieces. Like when I was in the sessions, there's a representative from Suzuki who's there as an expert, because I can't just play the pieces however I want. I need to keep in mind how the students need to hear them for training purposes and for like speed. I can't just take off in a tempo and then
zip through book.
Yeah. I can't just be totally free with all the rhythm and like do full vibrato. I mean, I could, but then it wouldn't be helpful. It would kind of be counterproductive. So there was someone there as a sounding board for those questions. And sometimes I would have an instinct about the rhythm, and I'd say, should I wait? And they're like, yes, that's the tradition. You just hold that and then start the beat on the next note. And that was just so deeply embedded in me from having learned that music a really long time ago. So it was very nice. And as I was recording, I was thinking about how these are the recordings that all the little Suzuki kids and their families are going to be listening to.
In car rides and carpools.
Yeah.
Nonstop.
Yeah. It was a big honor, because that's a big responsibility, but also really sweet.
Yeah, so I just want to transition maybe to some of your less traditional projects.
Okay.
So in terms of, I think, social media, you have the hashtag 100 Days of Practice. I had promised the audience we'd ask about that. and you just told me.
I just finished.
You just finished 100 Days of Practice.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that, and maybe we'll start to wrap it up and open it up to the audience.
Okay. So it began for me as a response to a visual arts project that I saw posted on Instagram. And the suggestion from the host of that project was just to pick a topic that's like 100 days of whatever, but it's work in progress, not to post your finished work. But because there was, at that time with visual art on Instagram, there was an issue kind of like of people only posting their best stuff, and it being kind of like intimidating to be there in that scene. And it was a way of opening up the behind the scenes to be more public. And I like to draw for fun, and I was like, maybe I'll just like draw for 100 days. And I was like, no one wants to see that, and I don't think I'll be drawing for 100 days if I start 100 days of drawing. So I thought I should do 100 days of something. Because I mean, I wanted to belong to this visual arts project. I was like the unpopular kid who's like trying to be in the crowd, and they're like, oh, I'll just do this little thing on the side, then maybe you'll notice me.
So something tells me if you actually posted 100 pictures, people would look at that.
You would be surprised.
They would look at what I'm drawing.
You would be surprised. It's interesting. People are very into me playing the violin. So people are very kind and tolerate my other ideas, but me playing the violin is really what people are there for. And so I just wanted to kind of participate in this project, but in a way that was natural to me. And so I was like, I practice anyway. I should practice anyway, so I'll just do that. And I didn't honestly think that anyone would care or notice. I thought if anything it would be annoying because it wasn't finished material, and we're not taught that practice is something anyone wants to hear. Like, if anything, we're taught that no one wants to hear practice, and that we shouldn't be playing through like a performance when we're practicing. It should be practice, but it's not a performance. It's not for public consumption. And so I was just thinking, oh, I better be ready with some like good content after all this is over for the people who stuck around. And I started getting feedback during the first 100 days that it was really making people feel comfortable about their own practice. And people thought it was very brave of me to post my practice. But I go on stage in front of thousands of people and perform. I was like, there's nothing brave about like playing not particularly well for the camera and putting it up there like this. It didn't, for me, translate into an act of courage. It was like just something very inconsequential, I thought. But seeing that really made me realize exactly how isolating practice usually is, and how much pressure we're taught to put on ourselves in practice. I mean, I equate practicing as a student to being told to stand in front of the mirror, pick out everything you don't like about yourself, and fix it all by yourself, and then present yourself to a judge to see if you got better. That's really what it is. I mean, you are really going into the practice room to find problems with your playing, to figure out how to solve them. The problems are there because you don't know how to fix them. Like, how are you supposed to fix something that you're doing because you don't know how to fix it? And then there's a deadline of a lesson or something, and you just, it's a really uncomfortable experience. And I have arrived at a place where, for me, practice is about like experimenting, finding solutions. You can't force something that's not ready to happen. So just meandering around it, trying this, trying that. And all the while, I do have very high pressure deadlines. However, whatever I do in the practice room, like, that's as far as I will get with that piece at that time. Then I go out and I play it and I learn something on stage. And I'm like, okay, there's something else I need to figure out. Let me just do what I can. Perform it. That didn't work. Let's see. Let's try this little other idea. And, you know, that's been such a healthier process for me. I think about the pressure of practicing every day from when we're little. We were talking about this earlier. There's nothing I do every day of my life besides survival things. Like, I don't want to watch my favorite movie 100 days in a row. I don't do anything the same for 365 days of the year, except I do fortunately have a place to live, I have a bed to sleep in, I have food to eat. Those are the things I do every day. And not everyone has access to that, so I recognize that privilege. But practicing is not a survival skill. I think we need to keep that in mind. It's a lifelong experiment, and it's a lifelong pursuit, and it's for you to find out who you are as a musician without anyone watching you. The pressure is off when you're practicing. That's what practice should be. And so the more I realized that by reading people's comments, doing these 100 days of practice seasons, the more I realized how important it is to talk about that, take the pressure off. It's your time to do your thing, your way.
So that realization only is recent for you then, because the 100 days started about 5-6 years ago? Oh, yeah. Yeah,
I think also watching myself practice and seeing how I work, because I didn't see how I worked before. And also just growing into who I am as a musician. Like, I've always been trying to find my flow, even when I was already performing full time. Always trying to align what I wanted to do with what I was actually doing. What do I want to communicate versus what people are hearing from me? So that was what I did in practice. That was what practice was for.
So probably the last question, and then we'll open up to the floor, is that you just described yourself in such a serious way, and it just seems like maybe some of the videos and some of the projects you've done are not quite as serious. So, for example, you appearing on stage with two-set violin, hula hooping, and playing Paganini.
But I double octaved it.
How many of you have seen that? So that definitely tells me you have a great sense of humor, and we've been like laughing throughout all of today.
Yeah.
So
I take my work really seriously. It's a big responsibility, and there are a lot of people who save up money to buy tickets for concerts. They save up money to buy records. A lot of people give their time to listen to my work, and I take it really seriously just to do my best to create an emotional connection, an emotional experience, and not to have anything get in the way of that. And that's why I work really hard. But I love music. I love performing. I love that feeling of connecting with everyone. I look at music as a public service, even though it's a business, it's called an industry, but it's something that we can provide for each other. I get things from the audience that I don't get from myself in normal life, and I hope I give things to the audience in performance. Like, I give feelings and experiences and moments with my colleagues. I hope that those are meaningful to people. And when you get comments from people like, you see someone when they're a student, like years ago, I would meet someone who was kind of my age, like a teenager. I'd meet them after a concert, and then 10 years later, they're coming to the concert, and then they bring their baby, and then the kid plays an instrument. 10 years later, they're at the, and it's nice. You realize that you're part of people's lives, and they really, there's a role that you play in someone's life, and you don't exactly know what's meaningful to whom at which times. So I take every performance really seriously, because in every concert, there's someone experiencing my current feeling. So if I'm honest with my playing and I really express my feeling, that person who needs that format to understand that feeling in themselves or acknowledge that feeling in themselves, that won't be really meaningful for them. There was a concert recently where I think my colleague and I were super exhausted, and we're like, we're gonna get it together for the concert. We're gonna do it. And then I was like, I bet you there's someone in the audience tonight who is celebrating a birthday. And then sure enough, after the concert, someone was like, my parents got me this ticket a year ago for my birthday, and I've been looking forward to it, and here we are. I've had people tell me that, this particular recording was playing in their parents' room during hospice, or like their baby was born to this music. And I'm like, I'm just I'm just one person, but there's this whole continuum of music, and it's really meaningful, and to be given the opportunity to communicate through this music, it's a really big deal that I don't take lightly. So even in the two-set thing, I was practicing it, and I am maybe not the best hula hooper, but I can keep it going. I practiced the hula hooping. I didn't just go out there and do it. Like, I practiced at home with Paganini. I practiced my Paganini. I don't just walk in and toss things off, but I also love spontaneity and I love the moment. So I just always try to be prepared for those moments so that when something important happens, I can just step into it and absorb all that feeling.
Well, I have to say, it was really, really fun to be in the audience, and all of a sudden there you were with the hula hoop.
No one knew I was watching the show beforehand either.
No, we did not know. And everyone around us was losing their minds. Oh my God, that's Hilary Hahn with the hula hoop. So what is she gonna do with the hula hoop?
It's funny when your name becomes an expression, like Hilary Hahn. I don't go through life like I'm, walking down the hall, I'm like, I'm Hilary Hahn. It's but everyone is like, that's Hilary Hahn. I'm Hilary, hello, or Miss Hahn, or for me, my name is two separate words. It's two-set violin, Hilary Hahn. Is that Hilary Hahn? That's Hilary Hahn. It's funny. It's really cute. I really appreciate the acknowledgement.
I think on that fun note, let's pause and let's hear from the audience. So I do have two of our wonderful aides, or is it just one? Okay, so while they get situated, so it's COVID, so we're not passing the mic. So May, if you can go to the other side, that'd be great. And then I think, I think the idea then is, if you have a question, raise your hand, and either Andrew or May will come. And just speak the question, and one of them will speak into the microphone. So don't pass the mic. Yeah, so it's just tell him the question, and then May, you'll speak into the microphone. Got it.
We have a human amplifier.
We're trying to be COVID safe. So you're just holding the microphone.
No, wait, I got it. Everyone, sit down. You can sit down. Thank you. And then you say your question to your human amplifier, who then has a microphone.
And he will repeat.
Yes. Thank you.
While we're over here, Alvin here has a question.
Great. Okay. You're next.
So Alvin asks if you've ever had any times that you felt unnerving to play, maybe even a little bit nervous, even though you've practiced a lot, even despite, performing so often over your career. Or unmotivated is a caveat to the question. Unmotivated to practice?
Unmotivated. Yeah.
Would you like me to talk about the practice or the performance experience?
Should I just talk? It was more so being unmotivated to play and just not feeling like you were playing with feeling and emotions, even though you've been playing for such a long time. So the gist is how do you play with feeling, even though you're playing so long?
Okay. I did hear that one.
Okay, great.
So how do I continue to play with feeling even though I'm unmotivated? This is something I've been working on constantly all of my life as a musician, and I think I finally landed on something. So maybe I can give you a little tip to leapfrog you over 20 years of figuring it out. I play what I'm feeling in the moment. I used to think that I should plan it, I should practice it. This is how I want to play. My interpretation of something was a series of decisions and a style, but the problem was I kept getting reviews, comments on the YouTube videos, she sounds robotic, it's not expressive, and I'm pouring myself into this. What's not connecting? I would get reviews constantly about great technique, but kind of reserved musicality. And I was like a puddle at the end of the concert. I was so worn out, and I was like forcing all of the possible emotion in. And I realized I needed to, it was only when I started doing solo Bach recitals for the first time, like a few years ago. I never played a solo recital before because I love working with people, and I didn't feel the need to do a full solo recital. But when I started doing it as a project, I realized that I was second guessing myself too much to get through a concert. Like I just was not feeling like I was in a very uncomfortable psychological state when it was just me, and I was trying to do things. I was trying to do this, I was trying to do that, always like judging what I was doing as I was going. And on the third concert, I decided I'm just gonna stay. I was working on this in the master class a little bit today, so this is a little bit of the background on how I arrived there. So I just decided I'm just gonna stay on these notes until I feel like I'm done with them. The whole concert. Every note, I'm gonna be in it as long as I need to be in it, whether that's shorter than I planned, longer than I planned, slower, faster, in good taste, not in good taste. I am just going to enjoy every note and not think ahead, not think back for an hour and a half. And it was so cleansing and so also healing as a musician. You're trying. You're like analyzing yourself, trying to get better, trying to do this, trying to do that. Did I do it? Did I not do it? How good was that concert? Just to be in every note as it went by. And it took me all of those decades of experience to be able to do that and recognize when I was in the right note at the right time for myself. But the reviews were entirely different. The feedback on my social media commentary, totally different. And I was like, that's what I needed to do all along. I needed to be in my space emotionally, whatever that was. And so now, instead of working against whatever's happening in my day, that idea, the show must go on because we feel things, not despite things going wrong. You have a flu and you go, don't take this, like don't go work with COVID, whatever. But when I was growing up, it's like, are you sick? Can you perform? If you can, you go out and do it despite being sick. Now it would be like, am I low energy? The show must go on because I'm low energy, and I'm gonna change my energy in the course of the show. So I'll start performing low energy. I'll be like, just not a day where I'm gonna play loud right now. I don't have fast in me. I don't have dynamic in me. I'm going to really take this energy down, even if it's like the beginning of the Brahms concerto. Slow it down, take your time, and then at some point you've identified with that low energy and you're like, okay, I'm sick of it, let's go. And then it picks up and you've completely gone through your own evolution with the audience, and you arrived honestly at a different mood, and everyone has been there with you. And that, I think, is what is motivating. Music is this channel for you rather than this, despite this, I have to do that. If you can work with it, it's amazing. And it's that thing, like whatever you're going through, there's someone out there who hears it and feels it and needs that. So the more you can just be true to yourself, obviously not, you're working with colleagues, you want to find a way to connect with your colleagues and do that same emotional honesty while playing. I think that it is really a very, very special conversation at that point. You could do that in practice too. Just take a moment and where am I emotionally? Why do I feel this resistance? What is going on? And don't fix it. Just like be with that. Just notice. It's that idea. Notice what's going on, and just say, okay, name it. Notice it. Name it. Leave it alone. Just do your thing. And I think it's then it's not a matter of motivation. It's a matter of like living through it. I think we had this question. You've been so patient. Now you can stand up. Now I understand what's happening. If you want to stand up, you can stand up.
Hi, Hilary.
Hi.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. You have a big voice.
I'm Ray. I'm a first-year undergrad at Yale, and I play the violin especially meaningful for me. So
Great.
thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
I was just wondering, for those like students who might not necessarily be pursuing a professional career like playing music, how can we still keep like music like a daily part of our lives?
This may be my own inclination, but I think we can all make the world better by connecting and connecting with people we know, connecting with people we don't know. Music can be a conduit for a lot of things. So I find that when I need to keep things moving musically, despite a lot, because a lot of my work has nothing to do with playing the violin. So I'm always trying to find time to practice, and that's actually why 100 days of practice is good, because then like the work is practicing. Yes. But you know, when you don't have a lot of time, maybe have an overarching goal. Like, what are you going to do with the music? What is the music going to mean for you? What's it going to mean to the other people in your life? What's it going to mean to the community? You can maybe put together just like a little goal of some community project, and then the more you collaborate with people, the more you'll be forced to prioritize the music, and also you'll get that feedback loop from, you know, when you're in school, you have performance opportunities. When you're not, you may not have performance opportunities, so create ones that make a difference for some other people, and then it's not so much about like delivering the perfect performance from the stage, it's about the purpose of music. Everyone has individual ideas, so your idea will be valid, and you'll be able to like feel like there's a real point to it, which is very motivating when you don't have a lot of time as well. That would be my suggestion. Hi.
I'm also a first year at Yale. My name's Eric. I'm not a violinist. I've played piano for the last 13 years. But, you know, for me, in my experience, no matter how much work goes into preparing for concerts, even, you know, no matter how stressed you are during the concert itself, it's still a lot of fun. So my question was going to be, what is your favorite live performance experience or just performance experience?
Like ever?
Ever or within the last 6 months, whatever arbitrary time frame.
I'm going to take a two-pronged answer, because there's actually a kind of performance that evolved during lockdowns that wound up being a lot more meaningful to me than I had expected, but it was not a live performance situation. So I pre-recorded a video of a world premiere, and then it was a global world premiere. It was Michael Apels' piece, Isolation Variation, and it was commissioned as part of a virtual residency at my request. And I got to watch during the premiere, I got to watch who was tuning in from where around the world. And usually world premieres are just in a place, whoever can get there. So it's really just like a hall premiere. That's the very first one in the world, so it's a world premiere. But it's not a global world premiere all at the same time. And so that, and then also having that video then that I can send to other virtual performances as a performance, it increases like the reach of contemporary music. It increases the effectiveness of one performance that I recorded. And so that's actually been very special to me. That's the most special performance out of the lockdown experience. And I think we need to keep those things going, because there's value in that we cannot achieve in a live performance in a hall. Obviously, live performances are not replicable virtually. So we need to keep looking at ways that are individual to live performances that strengthen the strengths of live performance, and then other formats that strengthen the strengths of virtual connections. For a live performance experience, I think personally the most enlightening one was that Bach recital where everything clicked, which happened to be at Lincoln Center. So I was returning to Lincoln Center, which I played at as a teenager and have played at since. I've gone to performances there, but I had the entire, I don't know what they call it anymore. It used to be Alice Tully Hall, and they renamed it, and I was like an old person. So I'm stuck back in Alice Tully times. But I was playing, and I was the only person backstage. I was the only person on stage. I was the only person performing. And when I left the hall and they turned out the lights for the hall, I was like, that was just me. And that was the concert where I stayed in every note. And it was like this eternity of a super special moment that it just drew me through it. And then the realization, like, wow, look where I've landed. I think no matter what we achieve in life, it's important to look at where we are. Like, where did we think we'd be, and where are we now, and what are we proud of right now? In every class, in every conversation with a student, I always ask, what are you proud of? Because I think we forget to ask ourselves that. So, I think the moments where I've been able to really sort of sit back and be like, whoa, this is a very cool thing that music enables. Those are probably my favorite performances. Thank you.
I just wanted to mention, since you did bring up like what your audience means to you, it happens to me at birthday today.
Happy birthday! Oh, that's so cool. I'll let you select the.
Maybe the person in the jean jacket. That's you. Yeah. That is you with red shirt and jean jacket. Yes.
Yeah. Do you need a mic or a person? You can say it and they can translate it.
Yeah. Okay. Living dangerously. Okay.
Thank you so much for coming to Yale and giving your talk. It was really wonderful to hear you play. I'm a master's student at the School of Music. One of the things that I'm very passionate about is the intersection of media and music, and one of your recent projects was with David Lang and involved AI, and I was curious about how that came about and how you see the future of music interacting with the new forms of media that is currently emerging and always changing and transforming our art form.
That was part of a project that I co-founded. So that was something that I was working on a lot during part of my sabbatical and also part of the season that mostly was canceled last season. There's an AI scientist named Carol Riley who she and I go way back socially, and we had been talking on the phone about just a brainstorm of like, where does music and AI overlap? And I love talking with people from different fields and kind of interpreting their knowledge into a musical or artistic spectrum, kind of like when I go to a museum and I see the brush strokes of the painting, or I see like how an artist sort of dug into the paper with a pen, and I can almost feel it in my hand and translate it to a bow stroke. What would it feel like to make that art? How can I make the sound like that visual impression? And so I do that same parallel drawing with other art forms, and I think AI, interestingly, I think this, but AI scientists do not. But I think AI is an art form because there's a lot of interpretation in coding. There's a lot of beauty in how AI programs and systems are structured. And AI is at a point right now with music where a lot of the foundation code is being written, and a lot of the ethics are being established. And so it just seemed like an interesting thing to explore. Let's see where the state of the arts, where the state of the art is, and let's see if these composition programs work for composers on a really high interpretive level, or is it more of a practical thing? And so it was sort of testing the systems a bit, and it was tricky to find composers who were interested in that because in a way when you're composing it's hard enough without having to learn a new language of composition, having to be restricted. But David has done a lot. A couple other composers were interested as well. So Michael Apels actually did a piece that was premiered by Dominic Cayley, wonderful pianist based in LA. And I was happy to see that they kept working together. It makes me so happy when people, it's like artistic matchmaking. And like, aw, you go do your thing. So it was, yeah, but that project, the idea behind that project was to see if we could kind of bring the fields together, because they kind of want to be together, but they kind of don't know how to be together. Like a lot of people misunderstand what AI is and what it can do and what it can't do. And a lot of people misunderstand what composition is, what it can do, what it can't do. But I have found it's actually a lot harder to get those two fields talking to each other, because still the purposes are at odds. But there are places where they overlap, and so I think that's the direction we'll probably go with that project that we're developing. It's a little bit in suspense because the original idea we had testing the systems turned out to be quite complicated, but the pieces that came out of it were really fun. So what David did was he input a bunch of his work and then got the ideas that the program gave him and made those into something. So he started the piece that he wrote for me with the AI's ideas. He started it with his melody and like overlapped. So he put an AI note in between each of his notes. So at first it's the thing that he put in. And then he starts alternating. So it's not him collaborating with, it's them having the similar source, but like kind of parallel making art. And then it ends with just the notes the AI was doing. So I think that's a really great idea. And that's something that is very David. It's very David Lang. And he's a very open-minded composer. And in fact, he was one, taking it back full circle to what we were talking about with the 27 Encores. Oh. He was one of the first composers who was super on board with the idea of having everyone together on that project. He's a very inclusive community builder among the composition, all of the composition representatives these days. And he just, because he does Bang on a Can and all these other projects, it was really nice to find people who would be on board with this experiment, who would struggle with it, and make something really interesting out of it. Does that answer the question? Yeah. Okay. Where is this going? I don't know. That's where we currently are. I think people want projects to have a clear goal, but sometimes it's the point is like exploring where can the goal be. Yeah.
So I'm afraid we are actually out of time. So can you please all join me in thanking Hilary Hahn?